Freedom or Death is a new documentary focusing on Ukraine's 2014 EuroMaidan protests and the conflict in the country's east. The final film was compiled from hundreds of interviews and hours of footage from the most remarkable times of revolution and war. The producer of the documentary is Ukrainian-born filmmaker Damian Kolody. He joins us now on Viewpoint. Damian, thank you for coming into our studios.
Good morning, Tom.
So please tell us a bit more about this film.
Well, this film is my second film on the Maidan. My first was on the Orange Revolution. So essentially, this is a continuation documenting the same kind of struggle that Ukraine has been having for democracy, for a fair system. Obviously, when the demonstrations started, or this Maidan was different than the last Maidan in a lot of ways, but I came there again and you know, kind of used the same format to try to tell the story of why people were out there on the Maidan, who they were, what they wanted. I really realized that a lot of people in the West didn't have a very good idea or understanding of what was going on, particularly with all the manipulation of Russian media, that it was actually having an effect on people in the West. So I really wanted to make a film that presented to them these events in a very understandable way, that gave enough background and context and chronological fashion, so that it really was clear to someone who doesn't know anything about Ukraine, you know, from where it is on the map.
When you were there, did you take interviews from the square in Kiev?
Yeah.
That was one of your things.
Yeah, so my format or my style of telling these stories is to really try to do interviews in the moment to tell the story, rather than people filming people recollecting events in the past, to, you know, to have them talk about what's happening in the moment. So that's, I feel that brings the viewer more, it's more visceral, brings the viewer more into the feeling of what it felt like to be there on the square. So that, you know, most of the interviews are happening in real time, basically.
Yeah. And there's a lot of films that have been brought out about the Euromaidan revolution. So what makes yours different now, would you say?
Well, for one thing, it's from my point of view as an American of Ukrainian descent. So there's a personal, I think, angle to kind of narrator to help tell the story and help the viewer relate. It's also, I think, mine's the only film that I've seen that really shows how it leads into the war and works in the Russian factor from the very beginning, how they were involved behind the scenes and then came to the foreground after Yanukovych left, and they came into Crimea and then Donbass. So, you know, I think it really paints a pretty broad picture of tying those events from, you know, from the students getting beaten to MH17.
So it's a whole series, step by step almost, of what happened.
Yeah.
And you've been showing your film in eastern Ukraine recently to a lot of students and soldiers. You've been to 30 institutions over the past few weeks.
Yeah.
So how's that been? It must have been really interesting.
That's been an incredible experience because, you know, it just kind of came about very naturally, where we had one screening here in Kyiv, and a volunteer from one of the churches in Slavyansk who they've been doing a lot to support people in the East, suggested that we'd show the film out there. So we did a couple of screenings out there, and we screened in the library in Slavyansk. And they said, you know, we can screen in the library in Kramatorsk, in Konstantinivka.
In all these different towns that were occupied at one point.
Yeah, so these were all, so we were focusing on towns that were once, you know, held by the separatists and are now near the front line. And showing them in schools and libraries, universities, and it was all through kind of the educational network out there. These libraries just stay in contact with each other, and they set up most of our screenings.
And what was the reaction of the soldiers? Because now some people would think that maybe they're used to the war, they know what's going on. Was this actually the case from what you saw, the people that you spoke to?
I think they come a little skeptical to see the film, but once they see it, they get very, very emotional. I mean, it's telling their story. The film tells their story of why they're out there and why it's important for them to be fighting. You know,
so it's like a morale boost.
I think it is like a morale boost. Yeah, definitely. You know, afterwards they come up, they speak to me, they're very emotional. You know, some guys just really just feel, you know, they're crying during the film. So I think it really affects them in a way, very powerful, emotional way, and it's telling their story, and it's kind of surreal to be showing, you know, there's scenes of soldiers dying in the film, and you know, these are their fellow soldiers. So it's definitely a surreal moment
And there's not many filmmakers who actually do this. Usually they would apply to big film festivals to get their new documentary shown, but no, to take it to the actual East itself, I mean, I don't think this has ever been done before, as far as I'm aware.
I don't think so, yeah. It wasn't I did apply for film festivals, and I'm waiting, but it's such a long process where you apply, you hear back 6 months later, the festival happens 6 months after that, and I really realized this film is important to people in the East, or it's important everywhere, but especially in the East Ukraine, where they don't have all the information, and it's important to show people, especially young people there, what happened, what really happened.
Yeah. And what's their attitudes in eastern Ukraine? Do they support the government, or do some people actually support the separatists? I know when I was there earlier this year, there was still a feeling that people saw more in common with the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic than they did with the parliament in Kiev. Was this what you felt?
I mean, there's still, my understanding is that there's still a lot of anti-Kiev sentiment and pro-Russian sentiment out there. The people who are coming to these screenings generally are kind of Ukrainian activists. So I can't say that this is, a good scale of average sentiment in those particular places. But I was surprised how many Ukrainian patriotic people there are there, and that they're very active. And, maybe they're the minority, but
they're not shy in coming forward.
Yeah. I mean, now, at this point in time. So I would say, we try to focus on the schools and universities because I think kids still have an open mind, and this information, even if they don't agree with it, or they see that there's another point of view to maybe the story that they've been told to Russian media, by Russian media. So the hope is that if they understand that maybe they start to analyze and critique the media that they do see on the TV.
Yeah, and it's not just in eastern Ukraine, but also internationally, people start to rethink what they've been shown before. Is this what you found when you've maybe handed a copy of the documentary to your friends in Canada, the States? What do they say? Are they surprised by
well, the ones who don't know much about what was going on are pretty shocked at what actually happened, that they didn't know about this, and they get very emotional. They say, they start paying attention to news stories about Ukraine. Now they have like a base of understanding for events that are happening currently. So it's an effective tool in educating people and engaging them with what's happening in Ukraine, I found.
Yeah, because cinema is very important. Cinema and film, it's not just like political lobbying and different initiatives at state level, but also films have quite a big impact, don't they? And you found this with your other film as well.
Yeah, Revolution. I found that this film, in particular, because there's death involved, and I show it pretty graphically, that it's really effective as a medium to illustrate what happened and engage people emotionally. Even Ukrainians who know what happened, just to kind of, they've forgotten, it's been 2 years, to really present it in this format where they get to re-experience the events from the beginning and throughout, and really feel like they're there and they're part of it. It's powerful. It's a powerful medium, and I'm almost shocked at how people react to it. I have kids coming up to me and just wanting to hug me after the film. It's really, really emotional. I've never experienced anything like that with any other film. So it's quite, I guess, reaffirming that this film is necessary, and film as a medium can be really powerful.
Yeah, and what's your ambitions to take this film abroad? You said that you'd applied to several film festivals, and you've already shown it at 1 or 2 film festivals, is that right?
I haven't shown it at any film festivals yet. I'm still waiting to hear back from some of the bigger ones, like Berlin, Hot Docs in Canada, Tribeca, San Francisco. They're mostly in North America or Europe.
Yeah.
But still haven't actually had my film festival premiere. So I've been focusing here, showing it here in Ukraine, because I realized there's an interest for it. I have 1 screening, and then I have 2 or 3, other invitations somewhere else. So it's kind of very like a snowball effect. People, a lot of teachers feel it should be in all the schools in Ukraine. It's pretty powerful. So I'm hoping it gets out abroad and on a larger level, so I'm not just preaching to the choir, but at the same time I see it's really needed here in Ukraine, and I'm hoping to do additional screenings. I need to find some sponsors so we can continue showing it, maybe in Odessa, Mykolaiv, Kherson region there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about funding, just very briefly. What about the funding for the film? Where is this coming from?
So for the tour specifically, we found kind of some money from 4 different funders, Ukrainian Congress Committee in New York, Patricia and John Shmurhun, who have an agricultural company here, another businessman in Kharkiv, Yuri Mikhailov.
So it's private investors who are giving money.
The Ukraine Image Agency, which is Ruslana's NGO, gave us money to get us to Mariupol. So we've been kind of, putting it together. The actual film, I raised some money on Indiegogo, just crowdfunding, and also Peter Chernyshev, who works at Kyivstar, came in and enabled us to finish the film here in Kiev, do all the post-work. Yeah, okay. It's been quite a...
Well, it's very interesting. Damien, thank you very much for coming into Viewpoint.
Thanks for having me.
That was Damien Collody. He is the producer of the documentary Freedom or Death. Now, back to the news.